Welcome to Illuminated, sponsored by the Independent Voters of Illinois Independent Precinct Organization. I am your host, Elizabeth Scott, and today we have a few guests who we have endorsed through the IVI-IPO. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Today with us we have Fritz Kaegi, the incumbent for the Cook County Assessor's Office. You were first elected in 2018 and you're running for a second term. So if you can, just tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the civic activities that you've been involved in.
Sure. So I grew up on the south side in Hyde Park, went to Kenwood Academy, and I'm a proud Bronco. I live in Oak Park now with my wife and 3 kids. I'm a member of the First United Methodist Church of Oak Park. And one of the civic activities that I was involved in before I was elected was I was a partner at Social Venture Partners Chicago, which supports nonprofits who are helping to fight the cycle of poverty, and we would adopt organizations like the Greater Englewood Community Development Corporation, the Metropolitan Tenants Organization, and others in helping them grow their capacity to serve others throughout Chicago. And that was one of the things I really loved to do. I was also a youth sports coach. I used to play baseball.
Fantastic. So since you were elected in 2018, what innovations have you implemented?
The most important thing that we've done is made sure that the biggest buildings were valued in line with the market, just like everyone else's properties typically had been. And what that's done is it's reduced homeowners and small businesses' share of the burden. And it's going to be keeping hundreds of millions of dollars in Chicago neighborhoods each year because they'll have a lower share of the burden. That's the most important thing that we've done. Chicago homeowners got a taste of this last year. It was the first time that the average homeowner's property tax bill fell in close to a decade in Chicago, and that's because the first initial step of bigger buildings bearing a little bit more of the burden started.
Okay. And if you're elected, again, if you're reelected, what will your priorities be for your second term?
Well, the priorities will be, first of all, continuing the great gains that we've made on transparency. We've become one of the most transparent offices in the nation, putting our formulas and codes online when we used to be known for not showing our math before. We'll continue the ethics work that we've done. I'm the first assessor who doesn't take campaign contributions from lawyers or appraisers who practiced before us, and we'll continue doing good work with data and making sure that even the biggest buildings are valued fairly so that homeowners and small businesses will be able to keep more of their money. More money will be staying in the neighborhoods. And just being able to keep that and make sure that it continues to stay in place is how we can have a really big effect on equity and good government at the same time while keeping more money in the neighborhoods. You know, we have a bigger impact on economic equity than just about any office because we affect people through their property tax bills, but also the value of their homes. And there's a lot more that we can do to make sure that homeowners are keeping more of their own money.
Okay, and speaking of that, what have you done or what will you do to inform property owners of the process of appealing their tax assessment if they feel that they're too high?
Sure, we're really proud. You know, it used to be that you had to do all the appeals online on paper, and when we came into our office, it was a shambles in many ways. One of them, remember that scene at the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark where you had those boxes going to the end of the horizon? That was the scene at our office. We had more than 600 tons of paper files in just 1 year's worth of appeals for 2018. So what we did is we put in place a new computer system so that people could apply for their appeals online. It's never been easier. So now most of our appeals coming in online, but also the number of appeals has been down for 3 straight years. Because our numbers are getting closer to the mark. They're getting more within industry standards, so fewer people see the need, but we can really focus in on the people who are appealing so we can address problems that have frustrated people in the past. I talked to so many people out there in the community who said they'd have to repeatedly correct our office on the most basic aspects of their home and that we weren't keeping track of it. Well, now we have a better system in place to do it, and we will be doing more outreaches than ever. You know, we got the first award in memory at our office from the International Association of Assessing Officers for our public outreach during the pandemic. We also got an award from the National Association of Counties for our online appeals. And so we're going to continue to do that outreach work and that digital work to make sure that we're reaching everyone and continue to do more events out there in the community, especially in communities where people might not speak English as a native language, communities where exemptions are lower, where they could be higher. That's where we really want to focus.
So, Assessor Kaegi, I know that you're very innovative and you have a lot of big ideas for your office. Can you tell me some of your other priorities?
Sure. So we think that we've made a lot of progress on making assessments more fair at the bottom end of the spectrum. It used to be that the more modest your home was, the more likely your home was to be overassessed. We've really reduced that a lot. But one of the things that we think is most important is to get better information about condition and quality of people's homes so that we're not overassessing homes that haven't been renovated recently. So one initiative that I'm really excited about was written about on Bloomberg last December. We're leading a group of the top 15 assessors in the nation. It's a bipartisan group. It includes the assessors from Philadelphia and Detroit, but also Maricopa County, LA, Phoenix, Dallas, Miami. We're leading a discussion group at the White House to get access to federal mortgage appraisal data. Why is that important? Because the federal government has lots of information because they guarantee lots of mortgages. They have information about which homes have not been renovated in a long time or might have condition or quality that's lower on the spectrum. And we think it'll help assessors throughout the country to make property taxes more fair, less regressive, especially for homes at the bottom end of the price spectrum. And so I just got back from Washington last week on the latest follow-up meeting on this. We've been working on this for close to a year now. We're really excited about it. And all the federal government has to do is just make available one data point. You know, they rate every home that has a mortgage in terms of condition and quality 1 through 6, and if they can make that available to assessors, this will be could keep hundreds of millions of dollars in our neighborhoods through even lower assessments. So this is one where we're seen as a real leader in using data science to make assessments more fair and less regressive nationwide.
Okay, and for those who do not know that are watching, what exactly does your office do? What does the assessor of Cook County do?
Such a great question, because even I found that when I came into this office, even people who've been steeped in government tax policy and people who are investing in real estate, they don't quite understand this, so how is the average person supposed to understand it? What we do is we estimate the value of homes and real estate. That's our job. And why do we do this? So that the property tax burden can be divided amongst us all fairly. And it's really important, you know, I mentioned earlier in the show that we're most proud of making sure that the biggest buildings were valued fairly in line with the market. The thing about our office is that we're really an office about equity. And if we don't get the values right on the biggest buildings, if we underestimate the value of them, that means that everyone else is assuming more of the burden, because we're all dividing up the pie, which is the tax burden, which is determined by our local governments and our schools. It's about $16 billion a year in Cook County, and it's our assessments that divide that up amongst us. And so it's really important to have an assessor who wants to make sure that the biggest buildings are paying their fair share so that smaller homeowners, small businesses don't have to pick up the tab for them. A big problem with the system before I came into office was that a lot of data showed that we were systematically undervaluing the biggest buildings, and that meant that an average taxpayer in Chicago could have been paying more than $1,000 per year more than they should have been because these bigger buildings were undervalued. So that's how the assessor makes a big difference, because it's all about equity. It's about determining each person's share of the cost of government. And it's really important that we do this accurately and equitably for every different kind of real estate. And so that's our job. The other thing that we do is we oversee exemptions, which are a way that the average homeowner can have some reduction off of the assessed value of their home for a home that they own. So seniors have the senior exemption, homeowners have a homeowner's exemption. One of the things that we're proud of is it used to be that seniors had to recertify every year that they were still over 65, which is kind of crazy. No one's getting younger. But it was an imposition on people, and a lot of people, like my dad and other people that I knew, would forget to apply for this exemption and they'd lose it. So we got passed in the General Assembly automatic renewal of the senior exemption so that it automatically renews, so seniors don't have to do that every year. That's part of our duty to make sure that everyone out there is getting the exemptions that they deserve. Just this year, we also got a bill passed in the General Assembly where people with disabilities who have their own special kind of exemption, they don't have to recertify each year that they have a disability. That if they're getting that credential that's active at the Illinois Secretary of State's office, their exemption will automatically renew at our office without having to provide more paperwork. This is an example of how we're trying to make sure everyone gets the exemptions they deserve.
That's fantastic. So is there anything else that you would like the viewers to know about you and about your campaign?
Well, sure. The most important thing to know about it is that you want to have an assessor who's making sure that even the most powerful, even the biggest buildings are paying their fair share, that they're not getting preferences, that they're not getting values that are artificially low, because this is an office that's about equity. So a problem in the past was that big buildings were artificially undervalued, and that there were property tax attorneys who would claim to have special access to get special reductions for their clients, and then they'd recycle those that access into contributions to the assessor. So we're trying to break that culture. I don't take any campaign contributions from lawyers who practice before the office. We've made our appeals anonymous to our analysts, so they don't see the identity of these lawyers anymore. We have a visitor's log. There are all sorts of things we've done to increase transparency and the ethical conduct of the office. But you want to make sure that when you're looking at an assessor, you say, hey, is this person willing to make sure even the most powerful are paying their fair share? And so sometimes you'll see criticism of me from big building owners out there. Everyone out there watching should know that that is the assessor doing his job, to make sure that I take the hits from them so that the average homeowner doesn't have to.
And one more question. If anyone is interested in volunteering for your campaign, how are they able to reach you?
They can go to fritzforassessor.com. That is our website, and there is information that you can find out about how to volunteer, how to keep in touch. You can also go to our Facebook page for Fritz Kaegi for Assessor, and you can follow us on social media there and on Twitter. I'm known as Fritz for Assessor with the number 4 on Twitter.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and taking the time to speak with us. I wish you the best of luck on your campaign, and from one fellow Bronco to another, I wish you the best of luck.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Now we have our next candidate, who was endorsed by the IVI-IPO, Mr. Joseph Michael Carr. He is running for the state representative for the 25th District. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I've been in the accounting and finance industry for 31 years. Have had positions ranking from being a banker to being a bookkeeper, to being an accountant, to being a CFO, to being an auditor. Now I have my own practice where we focus strictly on accounting and bookkeeping work for nonprofit organizations.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about your past civic activities.
Well, I think the biggest past civic activity that I can really boast about here is I was elected state chair of IVI-IPO for 2 years in a row, and I had to take a leave of absence in order to run for this position.
Okay, and why did you decide to run for state representative of the 25th District?
Well, I have lived pretty much in the district for the past 51 years. I'm 51, and I will say that I've lived in and out of the district, but mostly in the Hyde Park, South Shore, Greater Grand Crossing areas. So my wife and I, we met as Museum of Science and Industry tour guides in 1989, our sophomore year in college. So we have pretty much been residents of this area and raised our 3 children there. And I saw some changes that needed to happen just from being in the district and talking to my neighbors. Having lived in different parts of the district, I can see a disparity. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to run, because I could see that the northern part of the district was not receiving the same amount of resources as the southern part of the district. And a lot of that has to do with just where the northern part of the district is. It has the University of Chicago, which is very prevalent in that Kenwood High Park area. But then when you look further down the southern part of the district in South Shore and southeast side of Chicago, you don't have those same type of resources. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to run.
Fantastic. And for those of us who do not know, can you give us the boundaries for the 25th District?
Sure. The boundaries extend from 43rd Street is the northern tip, all the way down to 118th Street is the southern tip. And then the east is the lake. And when it comes to the west side of the boundaries for the west side of the district, it's kind of jagged. It's like walking upstairs, because the farthest end of the west side is to Drexel, but then it all dwindles all the way down till you get to like Avenue O in the 10th Ward.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And why should voters vote for you?
Well, I think that voters should vote for me because I really am good at listening to what people have to say. I've had my own challenges with my health. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor now. One of the experiences I was in a coma for 9 days, paralyzed for 2.5 months, and it took me 1.5 years to learn how to walk and eat again. In that time period, our family went through some significant financial challenges. And now, as we've going into 2.5 years in the pandemic, I know how people feel. They're just so tired of the financial strain on their lives and the stress. And I think that I can uniquely speak to that because I have been in a position before, and no one should ever have to be in a position where you have to decide whether you're going to feed your child or pay some bills. Healthcare is totally out of control. Illinois needs a single-payer healthcare system. People complain about the crime rate, and a lot of it has to do with many of the mental health facilities were closed down years ago. So these are the type of problems that are indicative to what's going on in the street right now. So we need more health clinics to open up in the 25th District. I want to bring mental health clinics back to the district, and want to make sure that everyone has an equitable life. Financially, I want to bring financial stability to the district, and by doing that, I think that my top priority would be working with families and developing ways for them to get resources.
I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Healthcare is definitely something that is needed and I think should be afforded of all citizens. Mm-hmm. But other priorities, if elected, what would some of your other priorities be for the district?
Well, other priorities for the district still always revolve around the family unit. Some of my civic activities, besides being the state chair, after my bout with cancer, I started a nonprofit organization called Fathers for the Future. And we teach financial literacy to Black and brown fathers from the ages of 16 to 30 years old. We've graduated over 300. We've worked with the Juvenile Detention Center, OAI Workforce, different organizations and churches throughout the city of Chicago. And I think financial literacy, understanding how to manage your money and provide for your family is really at the top of my list.
So one big question that I have for you that's been on the mind of a lot of constituents is predatory lending. How do you propose dealing with that?
Well, predatory lending, especially with the fathers and the families that I dealt with for Fathers for the Future, it is very prevalent in minority communities. It's another way of taking advantage of minorities. And I think that everyone knows what predatory lending is, but just kind of a quick overview, it's basically your payday loan stores and your auto loan stores. And they prey on people who need to have money quick. They get in a situation like we discussed earlier where they don't have a rainy day fund. And because they don't have a rainy day fund, they need that carburetor fixed in order to get to their job out at O'Hare. So they'll go to a payday store and they'll take out a loan. And the loan is a crazy interest rate, like 400%, which is just outrageous. And they take advantage of minorities and, some communities. I'm not just going to say black and brown people, but I know Caucasians that have to go to payday loan stores. In fact, during the period where I was talking about where we financially struggled, our family had to go to a payday loan store just because it's there and they know that you need to borrow that money. They're going to take advantage of you and charge you where you're going to end up paying 6 months of some crazy, outrageous interest rate. So I know that recently the General Assembly voted to bring down the percentage from that 400% to now, which they actually find reasonable, which is 36% for an interest rate. The incumbent voted for this, and I need to hear it from him why he thinks that 36% on any type of loan is acceptable, because coming from the financial institution industry, banks, traditional banks, they don't charge that. They pretty much only charge prime and then whatever they can make on top of that. So you might see somewhere between 10 to 15%, but 36%, that's just unreasonable to me. I think that the rate should be lowered from the 36% to something that's more relative, like 36, from 36 to 15. I think the biggest problem is that we tend to look at all of these issues through the lens of this is binary. Well, if we can't do this, we need to do this, instead of doing a lot of mitigating factors. Raising minimum wage, making it so people can take advantage of having to leave for work and not have to lose their pay. So there are all these different types of things that can be done. Yes, payday loan stores and auto loan stores, they definitely need to be more regulated, and that would be one of my priorities, to make sure that they're regulated. But we all need to think about how we can all rise together and what we can do as a community, not just little small communities, but the entire state, how we can all rise together.
Not a lot of people know who their state rep is. So my question to you is, how would you make yourself more visible in the community, and how would you keep in touch with your constituents?
Well, I think that that's a great question, because when I first thought about running for office, it was in January of this year, and I made the decision to run and went through the petitioning process. There was 400 signatures required to get on the ballot. My team, we gathered 1,240 signatures. We went door to door. We knocked on doors. We knock on doors every weekend as a team. As an individual, I walk on doors, knock on doors 5 days during the week, and then also on the weekends. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't know who their state representative is, not even what that person should be doing for them. So it's kind of an education process to begin with. Everybody can see, is very tangible. Oh, the light in my alley is out. Well, I need to call the alderman. I have a tree that has fallen down on my lawn. You know what? I need to call the service center. But they really don't understand what the state rep's job is. And to me, the state rep's job is two things. One is to legislate, and the other is to advocate. I want to be an advocate for my community down in Springfield, and that's the one piece that it's sometimes lost. You get so caught up with the legislation piece that you forget that your community wants you to be down there advocating for them. They want to hear from you. They want to feel connected. And I have been knocking on doors, and it just feels great to be able to talk to a resident. It doesn't have to be a voter, but just to hear her concerns or his concerns about what's going on in their community. And each one of the communities that make up the 25th district is very unique. And there's a lot of pride in that community. And that's sometimes forgotten about. And being that voice that says, you know what, the area in the 10th ward, or that area in the 7th ward, they're having an Easter egg hunt. You show up to the Easter egg hunt, and the parents just say, wow, nobody's done this. I haven't seen a state representative in, 6, 7 years. So.
Is there anything else that you'd like the general public to know about you and the position that you are seeking?
Sure. I'm very responsive. It's on my walk piece. And from my clients, one of the advantages that they say with working with me is I always make each client as if they're the number one client. And that's kind of how I see the job as the state rep. You know, you're that first line of political defense for the community. You know, your alderman and your state rep, they're kind of the two lowest level positions. So having an interaction with them where they feel like, wow, he's really responsive. He's hardworking. He's out there working for me every day. You know what I mean? That's really important to me because I really pride myself on being that person, being that guy that, you know what? He never says that he's the smartest person in the room, but he's the hardest working in the room.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested in volunteering on your campaign, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. www.carforrep.com. We have a website, and you can sign up for alerts and updates, and you can volunteer. As I said, we have canvassing every weekend. There are also some phone banking that we're going to be starting next weekend. So we're running a real campaign. You know, this isn't sitting in the ivory tower and saying that, you know, I want to run for office. This is going out old school, connecting with the voters, shaking people's hands, kissing babies, even in COVID, you know, kissing babies, doing everything you have to do to make sure that people know who you are and what you're about.
Okay, I've definitely seen you around. I know you've been knocking on doors because of their signs all around my block. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for coming. I wish you the best of luck. State Rep for the 25th District, Joseph Michael Carr. Thank you so
very
much.
much, Elizabeth.
All
Take
right,
care.
it's good seeing you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Joining us now, we have Alderman David Moore. He is currently the alderman for the 17th Ward, and you are also the Democratic committeeman for the 17th Ward.
Correct.
And you are currently running for the Secretary of State for Illinois.
Absolutely.
If you can just, first of all, give us a little background about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm from Chicago, grew up in Chicago. I started out in the Robert Taylor Homes of Chicago, grew up at Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church under the leadership of the late, great Reverend Dr. Clay Evans, and that's why I learned to serve. That was my first exposure to service, was in the church. Like at the age of 8. By the time I was 9 years old, I was at Operation Push, and I was at the packing house with Dr. Willie Taplin Barrow, the little warrior who had us holding up signs, and I didn't know what I was doing, but we were at the packing house fighting for voters' rights. So that was my first entree into civic engagement. And so when I was 11 years old, my uncle and my aunt wanted to give us a better chance at life, so they moved us out of the projects of Chicago and moved us to Inglewood. And I had thought I'd move to the suburbs. My uncle was an assistant precinct captain. They converted their basement into a 3-bedroom apartment for us. And my uncle would pay me $5 to run up and down the street putting literature in people's mailboxes. And I got to be honest, I didn't care about any politics. I just wanted that $5 for some Boston baked beans and Chico sticks. But it was when I turned 13, that same uncle took me to a breakfast with him. And he, there at that breakfast, I met a state senator by the name of Harold Washington, who was running for Congress. And he talked about the importance of young people being involved in their community. And at that point, that $5 no longer became important to me, but serving in my community is what became important to me. And that's how I started serving in the community.
Okay, and can you give us a little bit more background on your civic background?
Absolutely. So as I went in and started serving, I served as a block club president. I served as a CAPS coordinator, working with our police department. Then I became a precinct captain. From there, I became director of field operations for the 17th Ward Democratic Organization, working to get people elected. Worked on many campaigns, including Clerk Dorothy Brown, including including State Senator then Barack Obama when he ran for Congress, but also on his Senate campaign. As a matter of fact, when he ran for Congress, he didn't even win his own precinct. He only won 3 precincts in his whole district, and one of them was mine. And so that was the type of work that I put in, making sure that we had good servants getting elected. I went on to college. I had a dual degree in accounting and operations management after graduating from Simeon High School and West Illinois University in Macomb. And then I came back and got back involved in my community right after working for a Fortune 500 company. I just wanted to come back and serve in my community. And then there I fought against school closings. All of this before I was alderman. I fought for a living wage, for the fight for 15. All this stuff I did before I was even, thinking about running. I was more interested in just serving. And so all these things, I think you have to serve even before you think about being an elected official. So my groundwork was done before I became elected official. I remember, I think her name is Miss Beatty, when I first appeared before IVI IPO when I was running, and I got up there to speak. She said, "Wait, I thought you were somebody already." And she said, "Well, excuse me, I didn't mean that in an offensive way," and I didn't take it offensive. She thought I was already elected because of all the work that I have been doing for so many years. So that was one of the greatest compliments I ever received in my life.
And what made you decide to run for Secretary of State?
Absolutely. I tell people, there are 2 people I keep my eyes on. Anybody saying they want to be a preacher and anybody saying they want to be an elected official. Because it's not something you run to, it's something you run from. It's a calling on your life. So you accept that calling to serve, but there's a reason why you choose to accept that calling. For me, it was because just like Alderman, I love the Secretary of State seat because it's nonpartisan. I get to serve everybody, regardless of political involvement, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity. You just get to serve people, and that's what I like doing. I don't like all of the politics. I just like to serve people, and I think it's important that at least one seat in the state of Illinois remains a servant seat, and that's important to me.
And speaking of that seat, a lot of us do not know, a lot of the general public do not know. So could you tell us what exactly is the role of the Secretary of State and what does that office do?
Absolutely. So most people just know the Secretary of State's office as driver services, which is a very important role, getting your driver's licenses, registering your car vehicles. But there are 20 different departments within the Secretary of State's office. People don't know that the Secretary of State is the state librarian. And so as the state librarian, you get grant funds, and you want to maximize those grant funds so that your libraries can have the resources that they need. People don't know that the Secretary of State is, from the business department side, do your incorporation papers for when you're in a business. And a very critical part is the Secretary of State registered lobbyist, which that's why it's very important that you have somebody with integrity and character, because in the business that we are in now in terms of politics that people are doing, a lot of people are looking out for their self-interest instead of the interest of the people. And then even more importantly, when we talk about the Secretary of State's office, we talk in a lot of our communities, there's a lot of dialysis centers. We want to educate people on organ donation. All of that information comes from the Secretary of State's office. But in its whole entirety, the Secretary of State's office touches everybody in the state of Illinois. From the time you're teaching a child bike safety all the way up to the time you're giving a person their driver's license or registering them to vote. And so at some point, each person in the state of Illinois is going to come through the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, and if and when you are elected, what would be your top priorities?
Absolutely. So one of my top priorities is making sure that we do modernize that office. Bringing that office into the 21st century is critical. That office still working on a mainframe system, and and we can do cloud computing to make things go faster and be more efficient. But even more important, giving people more access. I was the first one in this race to say that since the Secretary of State is the state librarian, that we can bring those services close to people and use our libraries as satellite offices. One of the complaints that I've heard from people is that, hey, I have to go down there, I have to stand in long lines, I wish something was closer to my house. And the fact that we have our libraries, we can bring them closer to communities with different languages, closer to communities where people don't have to do long commutes. So that's important to me. But I also want to make sure that we're being very efficient, not only in terms of our operations, but also in terms of making sure that you got a fiscal manager there. My experience in 10 years in the private sector as an accountant and operations manager, those are the skills that I'm going to bring to the Secretary of State's office. It's important that somebody is a fiscal manager there, making sure that we keep those costs down, but also run effective and efficient operation. But my other important priority, again, the first one to say it in this race, but I like when my opponents take it because it means that I'm on the right track. I was the first. We got have 122 driving facilities throughout this state. I want to create 122, in honor of Jesse White, youth engagement officers throughout this state where we're giving full-time internships to our young people, teaching them civic responsibility, teaching them professional responsibility, and let them know about the different, not only professional jobs within government, but also those elected positions. A lot of people don't know about the middle management positions. Everybody think about that top position. I want to be this. But there are so many middle management positions that affect policy and affect how people give out contracts and everything. And we want to make sure there's equity in contracting, equity in hiring, and equity in providing these services in the Secretary of State's office.
Fantastic. Is there anything else that you want your constituents to know?
Absolutely. What's important, we have to have somebody that's creative. One of the things I was in corporate America, we were always taught that we couldn't stay competitive if we raise costs, right? And same thing we got to look at in the Secretary of State's office. We cannot keep taking and raising fees on our constituents. I was the first one to talk about digital license plates. Right now, we're dealing with a major issue of carjacking. Everybody is on edge about that. And one of the things about carjacking, and Senator Sheriff Tom Dart went before the U.S. Senate to talk about it. We're doing license plate readers and all of that, and they say you can read the license plate when a car is stolen. But when a car is stolen, guess who the license plate going back to? The person that they stole the car from. So it doesn't help us. What we've proposed are digital license plates in the state of Illinois. Right now, California, Arizona, and Michigan are using it so that when the car is stolen, it can immediately read out stolen so the police can catch the person in the car. Part of things what's happening that they're not prosecuting is because they're not catching the people in the car. Therefore, it's not a deterrence. So it's not just about just arresting, but it's also about deterrence so that that person will even think twice before they try to carjack you. And I think that'd be very helpful.
And what experience have you had which will make you most helpful in the office that you're seeking?
You know what, you're the first one that everybody that I've interviewed with to ask that question. And when you're interviewing for a job or anything, everybody does what? Look at your what? Resume. You look at all of my opponents' resumes, my resume outshines them all. I am not a, number one, career politician, and number two, I have a track record of not only working, but of serving. Right out of college, I had to work hard to get in college. I wasn't a millionaire, wasn't given a special legislative scholarship, but I had to earn my way through being an RA. I had to earn my way through working a work-study program. And those are like relationships that are developed across this state. And so as I've earned those things, the main thing I've been able to do is connect with the people. I am the people. The things that I go through are the things that they're going to go through. And so those skills of being a fiscal manager, those skills of being an operations manager, but more importantly, those skills of being a servant, reaching my people, reaching the residents, reaching the constituents, returning phone calls, listening to the constituency. That's what people want, and that's what separates me from my opponents.
Fantastic. So for anyone who's out there watching and they would like to volunteer on your campaign, can you please let us know how we are able to do that?
Absolutely. They can go two ways. First, they can call 773-846-0289. Please leave a message. Someone will get back to you, get you on the team. They can go to my website at www.moreforillinois, that's MOORE, moreforillinois.com, and sign up to volunteer. And we would love to have people throughout this state to continue to work with us because we have support across this state, and that's what I'm excited about.
Well, thank you so much for coming and taking the time out to speak to your constituents. I wish you the best of luck. Secretary of State David Moore, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.